I always board planes last. Not because I'm disorganized or slow, though the flight attendants often assume that, but because I don't like drawing attention. I sit quietly at the gate, wait for the flurry of business-class blazers and yoga leggings to settle, and only then do I rise. It's funny how walking with humility makes people assume you belong on the ground. The looks start early, especially when you wear a cardigan instead of cashmere and carry a canvas tote instead of designer leather. That morning, my boarding pass said, Seat 32B, Economy, Commando, the window. But apparently my face said, Treat me like a problem. As I stepped into the aisle, I gave the usual smile. Polite, practiced, non-threatening. The blonde flight attendant didn't smile back. She was tall, pristine, and visibly annoyed. Ma'am, we're closing the cabin. Next time, please board when your group is called, she snapped, gesturing like she was shooing a child into class. I blinked. I was waiting to avoid the crowd, I offered gently. Her eyes rolled so far back I thought she might sprain something. That's not how this works. Please take your seat immediately. I could feel passengers watching, judging, assuming I'd been difficult, that I was the problem. So I nodded, said nothing, and slid into my cramped seat. Elbows in, breath shallow, invisible, like I've learned to be. I could already tell it was going to be a long flight. About 30 minutes into the air, she passed by again. Same tight bun, same tight smile. But this time, she stopped beside my row. Excuse me, she said, loud enough for nearby rows to hear. We ask that passengers not bring homemade food on board. It creates unpleasant smells in the cabin. I looked up, startled. I didn't. This is just a granola bar. She raised an eyebrow. It's polite to ask before unwrapping things like that. I stared at her. A granola bar. She was policing granola bars now? I glanced at the suited man across the aisle chomping into a tuna sandwich the size of a toddler. No comment for him. I tucked the wrapper away and nodded again, quieter this time. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from a very old, very familiar fury. The kind you learn to swallow whole. The rest of the flight went much the same. Every time she passed my row, her eyes scanned me like I was an unsolved problem. She offered drinks to my rowmates, ignored me, offered snacks, skipped me. Once she handed out customs forms and deliberately leaned over me without acknowledgement. I was a ghost with a pulse. And then came the real moment, the one that pulled the pin from everything. A minor turbulence episode hit, not dramatic but bumpy enough. The captain came on with the usual fasten your seatbelts line. We jolted once, twice, and the man in the aisle seat beside me spilled his coffee. It splashed, barely, onto my lap and onto the floor. The attendant rushed over. What happened? She barked. The man pointed to the cup, still in his hand. Just a spill. Her eyes narrowed. At me. Ma'am, if you can't control your beverages, you shouldn't have them during turbulence. I blinked. It wasn't mine. It was his. He tried to speak up, but she waved him off. We'll clean this up. Next time, be more considerate. I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. Not then. Not yet. She turned on her heel and left, and something in me lit. Not a spark, a flame. Because it wasn't just this flight. It was every room I'd been dismissed in, every glance that weighed what I wore and not what I knew. Every time someone underestimated me before I even said hello. I waited. Not out of fear, out of calculation, because I know how systems work, especially aviation systems, and I knew this flight wasn't over yet. About 20 minutes before descent, the cabin lights dimmed. People relaxed, and I unbuckled quietly, reached into my bag, and pulled out a small black folder, the kind that only matters if you know what it means. I stood, walked down the aisle, and made my way toward the galley. She was there, restocking cups. Her eyes widened. "Ma'am, passengers must remain seated." I raised a hand, calm, firm. "You may want to alert the captain. His boss would like a word." She laughed. "Excuse me?" I opened the folder. Inside, my ID, federal clearance badge, and agency credential. "Rachel Bennett, FAA Oversight Division." Her face drained. This isn't protocol." "You're right," I said. "But then again, neither is harassing passengers based on appearances. I suggest you call the cockpit." She stammered something and reached for the intercom. The cockpit door buzzed open. A second flight attendant appeared, confused. I showed my badge again. "I've cleared this crew before. Let the captain know I'm here." Moments later, I was standing in the cockpit. It smelled like coffee, metal, and surprise. The pilot turned, saw me, and his jaw dropped. "Rachel, we weren't expecting inspection today." "No inspection," I said. "Just a conversation." His co-pilot looked between us. "You know her?" The captain nodded. "She's with FAA Oversight, senior investigator. She signed off on my last certification." I gave a soft smile. "Glad you remember. I'm also the person who recommended your promotion last quarter." He straightened. "Is everything okay?" I turned slightly toward the door. "We'll see. There's a situation in the cabin." When we landed, everything moved faster than usual. I returned to my seat, calm, collected, my tote bag still by my feet. The rude attendant avoided eye contact until we disembarked. She stood by the door, smiling at each passenger like nothing had happened. But when I stepped up, her smile faltered. I paused, just long enough. Then offered a quiet, "We'll be in touch." Her face froze. The pilot, who now stood beside her, gave a small nod. He knew. He'd seen the report I'd written on crew compliance, knew how much power my pen carried, but I didn't wield it like a weapon. Not then. Not yet. The next day, a formal complaint was filed, not just for me, but for the pattern I uncovered while reviewing her previous flights. Turns out, I wasn't the only one. There had been others, always women, always someone who didn't look the part, always small humiliations disguised as policy. And for once, the system listened. She was suspended pending review. Her record flagged. Her attitude documented. I didn't gloat. That's not my style. But I did receive a quiet note from the captain weeks later. It read, "Thank you for holding the line. We need more like you." I folded it once, twice, and tucked it away in the black folder, the same one I carry on every flight, just in case. Not for vengeance, for reminder. That sometimes justice boards quietly, sits in economy, and waits, because power doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it wears a cardigan, carries a granola bar, and knows exactly what altitude truth travels best. I didn't sleep much that night, not because of the flight, that turbulence was nothing, but because something inside me wouldn't quiet down. A low hum of injustice, the kind that vibrates through your bones. I'd seen this behavior before, of course, thinly veiled contempt wrapped in policy speak. But something about this one stuck. Maybe it was the way she smiled while cutting me down. Maybe it was how easily everyone else played along. Or maybe it was how long I'd stayed silent, even when I had the authority to speak louder than anyone on that plane. I poured coffee into a chipped mug, sat down at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. I typed in her last name, Everson, I'd read it on her badge, and cross-referenced it against FAA crew records. My clearance gave me more access than most. Not infinite, but enough to run a pattern check. At first, the data looked clean. Then I dug deeper. Incident reports, passenger feedback logs, flight crew testimonials. I found 6 flagged entries. All quiet, all unresolved, each one just below the threshold that would trigger formal review. That's how it works when you know the system. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. One complaint said she berated a mother for disruptive breastfeeding. Another logged her warning an elderly man not to ask for help getting up unless it was urgent. The stories were different, but the pattern was the same. Pick someone vulnerable, make a public display, walk away unscathed. Because who believes the quiet ones? I leaned back in my chair, the screen glowing with soft malice. I'd seen this game before. Hell, I used to audit people for it. It's always about plausible deniability. She never yelled, never cursed. She weaponized procedure, hid behind manuals while stabbing people with etiquette. And yet, she was still flying, still greeting passengers like a hostess with a dagger behind her back. The system had failed to ground her. That meant someone like me had to climb back into the cockpit of the truth. So I did. I called the compliance liaison and requested her full crew rotation for the past 12 months. I knew the name of the supervisor, Rodrigo. We'd worked together after that runway skimming incident in Atlanta. I told him this wasn't official. Not yet. Just observation. Rodrigo didn't ask questions. He trusted my instincts, always had. I printed out the logs, marked each flight. Then I started contacting passengers. Not directly, of course. I'm not reckless. But there are ways. Forums, feedback archives, even social media. I posted anonymously on a travel discussion board. Has anyone flown with flight attendant L. Everson in the past year and had a negative experience? Within 48 hours, I had 10 responses. 3 of them made my stomach turn. A cancer patient flying back from treatment. A college student with autism who was shamed for asking repeated questions. And a woman with a stutter who was mocked when trying to order a drink. Same patterns, same polished cruelty. Always hiding in plain sight. One reply hit me hardest. It was from a veteran, wheelchair-bound, who said, "She told me if I couldn't walk, I shouldn't travel. I've never felt so ashamed in my life." I stared at that message for a long time. My father was a Marine, served 2 tours, lost a friend in Kandahar. If someone had said that to him... I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and opened a new document. Subject: Preliminary Findings, Behavioral Pattern of Flight Attendant L. Everson. I wasn't filing a complaint. I was building a case. The next week, I flew again. Not for work, at least not officially. Just a domestic route. Quick turnaround. Guess who was listed on the crew manifest? Everson. Same tight bun, same performative professionalism. Only this time, I wasn't in seat 32B. I was in 4D, business class, courtesy of Rodrigo. I boarded early, sat quietly, watched. She didn't recognize me at first. Why would she? I looked different. Sleek jacket, leather laptop case, no granola bar. This time, I blended in with the people she usually catered to. The way she moved told me everything. Her smile for the businessman behind me was wide, crisp. Her voice, sugary and bright. But when a young woman in hijab boarded, Everson's smile tightened. "You're in the right group?" she asked. No warmth, just scrutiny. The girl nodded nervously. "I think so." "You think so," Everson repeated, loud enough for others to turn. The girl shrank. My hands curled into fists. I wanted to stand then, call her out in front of everyone. But no, not yet. I needed more. As the plane leveled off, I observed quietly. She walked the aisle like she owned it. Not once did she check on the young woman. Not once did she look at the elderly couple near the back who struggled with their tray tables, but she laughed with the men in button-ups, refilled their drinks like clockwork. Performance, polished, heart missing. Mid-flight, I stood, walked back to the galley. She turned, professional smile preloaded, until recognition hit her face like a wall of wind shear. "You." "Me," I said, calm, measured. "I thought you might like to know. I'm formally reviewing your in-flight conduct. This flight, and previous ones." Her posture stiffened. "You can't." "I can. And I am. You've left a trail, Miss Everson, and it leads directly through the lives of passengers who deserved better. You're not even in uniform. This isn't protocol." There it was again, her favorite phrase. "Protocol is my business," I said. "Yours is people, and you've failed them repeatedly." She took a step back. "This is harassment." I tilted my head. "No, this is oversight. There's a difference." Just then, the other attendant, older, calmer, appeared behind her. I recognized her too. Name tag said June. She nodded at me. Quiet solidarity. And then she spoke. "I've worked with her before," she said softly. "You're not the first to notice. Just the first with a voice loud enough to be heard." Everson looked stunned, cornered, like her script had vanished. I left the galley then, returned to my seat. I didn't need to argue. I'd already won, because the truth was no longer mine alone. By the time we landed, the whispers had started. Passengers murmuring, crew shifting nervously. Everson kept her distance. This time she didn't stand by the exit, didn't smile at the disembarking crowd. I did, politely, quietly. But when I stepped into the terminal, Rodrigo was waiting. He held a folder in his hand and a knowing look in his eyes. "Got your findings," he said. "We're moving forward." "Full investigation?" I asked. "Yes, and she's being grounded pending review, effective immediately." I nodded. A small part of me felt relief. But most of me felt tired. Tired of the weight women like me carry just to be heard. Tired of cleaning up after cruelty masquerading as professionalism. But not defeated. Never that. Because now, Everson couldn't hurt anyone else. Not while I was watching. And more importantly, not while others had found the courage to speak up too. The echoes were growing, and this time, they weren't bouncing off silence. They were shaking walls. They called it a hearing, but it felt more like theater. Beige walls, bad coffee, and a round table where reputations came to die quietly. I sat near the end, no nameplate needed. Everyone in the room already knew who I was. Across from me, Ms. Everson. No bun today, just a stiff ponytail and a lawyer with a laminated binder. She looked smaller without her uniform, less polished, more defensive. Like someone who finally realized the stage lights were on, and she was center. The HR rep began with protocol. "Today, we're reviewing allegations regarding inappropriate behavior and passenger misconduct by flight attendant Lauren Everson." Lauren. Her first name. Funny, I'd never thought of her as anything but Everson. She looked straight ahead. Not at me, not at the others. Just past us all, like this wasn't happening. But it was. And I wasn't going to let her blink it away. The rep continued. "Our panel has reviewed reports filed by FAA investigator Rachel Bennett, in addition to 7 corroborated witness accounts." She cleared her throat. "Ms. Bennett, you may summarize your findings." I didn't need notes. I'd lived this. Over 12 flights spanning 16 months, Miss Everson displayed consistent patterns of selective enforcement, verbal intimidation, and discriminatory behavior toward passengers perceived as less important. I let that hang. Then added, most of whom were women, elderly, or disabled. The lawyer shifted in his chair. "My client asserts she was merely following policy." "Policy doesn't require humiliation." I said, or silence when it's needed most. Everson finally looked at me. Her mouth tightened. You have no idea what it's like managing a plane full of people who don't listen, who act entitled, who bring their drama on board and expect us to fix it. Her voice was flat, hollow. I did what I had to do. I held her gaze. No, you did what you could do, because you thought no one would stop you. She looked away again. One of the panel members, an older woman with silver hair and a sharp jawline, spoke next. We've reviewed passenger statements, including one from a veteran who felt humiliated, another from a student with a documented disability. Can you explain why these individuals were the target of disciplinary language? Silence. The lawyer cleared his throat. Ms. Everson was under stress. She was often assigned long-haul flights without appropriate recovery windows. So were dozens of others, I cut in. And yet the only repeated complaints are hers. The HR rep nodded. Miss Everson, do you have anything to say for yourself? For the first time she looked unsure, not angry, not righteous, just exposed. I didn't realize people were taking it that way, she mumbled. I thought I was being firm. I almost pitied her. Almost, but this wasn't a moment for pity. It was a moment for truth. You forgot one thing, I said softly. The quiet ones? We remember. We document. And when we finally speak, we don't whisper. We testify. The room went still. Afterward, I stepped into the hallway. Cold fluorescent light. Low buzz of distant office chatter. Rodrigo joined me, file in hand. You crushed it in there, he said. They'll probably suspend her license, maybe even pull her certification. I nodded. She'll appeal. Let her. We've got enough to hold. He hesitated, then added, You didn't have to do all this. You could have let it go after the cockpit. I looked at him. And let the next woman board with a cardigan and be punished for existing? No, that's not how I work. He smiled, then paused. There's talk upstairs. They're thinking of moving you into training oversight, teaching the next generation. I raised an eyebrow. You want me in a classroom? No, he said. We want you rewriting the manuals. That stopped me, because it was more than a job. It was a signal. That maybe, just maybe, the system wasn't just correcting. It was evolving. I told him I'd think about it. A week later, I got an email. Subject line, Your flight experience, thank you. It was from the young woman in the hijab. The one Everson had humiliated during boarding. Somehow she'd found my name after the hearing. I just wanted to say, she wrote, I saw you stand up. I didn't know who you were, but I saw it. And it made me feel less alone. Thank you. I sat with that for a while. Longer than I'd sat with the hearing. Longer than I sat with the legal drafts. Because that's why I did it. Not for punishment. For dignity. For people who sit in seat 32B and think they're invisible. For the ones who don't have credentials or clearances or folders with federal seals. For the ones who are tired of being told to shrink. Months passed. The world moved on. So did I. But every time I board a plane now, I still watch. Not suspiciously, just carefully. I listen to how attendants greet the elderly, how they handle children, or people with accents, or passengers who ask the same question twice. And when I see kindness, I nod. I let it show. Because goodness should never go unnoticed. But when I see cruelty, when I smell it masked behind smiles, I don't stay seated. I move, quietly, firmly. Because this sky belongs to all of us. Not just the ones in uniform, not just the ones in first class, and definitely not the ones who think empathy is optional. I flew again last week. Small plane, Midwest route. No glamour. The woman beside me was nervous. First-time flyer, fidgety hands. The attendant, a man with tired eyes and a warm tone, knelt beside her. Talked her through the safety card. Let her hold his hand during takeoff. After we landed, I stopped him. "You handled that beautifully," I said. He blinked, surprised. "Oh, thank you." She reminded me of my sister, used to be terrified of flying. I smiled. "Well, you did her proud." He walked away, beaming. That's how you change things. Not just by punishing wrongs, but by rewarding what's right. One flight at a time, one seat at a time. You never know who's watching. Not to catch you, but to catch others when they fall. So next time someone treats you like you don't belong, remember this. Power doesn't always sit in the cockpit. Sometimes it sits beside you wearing a cardigan, and it knows exactly how to fly.